When my husband decided to renovate our hallway, I didn't think much of it. It was one of those things we had kept putting off for months. The scuffed beige walls, peeling corners, and nail holes from pictures long taken down. It was time. But instead of hiring a big company, we chose a local guy from around town. His name was Travis. I remember how casually my husband, Mark, had brought it up during dinner. I met a guy through Rick at work. He paints homes on the side. Works solo. Said he's got some time this weekend, he said, shoveling mashed potatoes into his mouth. Okay, I answered, not giving it another thought. When Travis showed up that Saturday morning, I wasn't prepared. He was younger than I expected, probably in his early 30s, and tall with sandy hair that curled slightly at the ends under his cap. He had this quiet confidence, not arrogant, just calm. He shook my hand firmly, looked me in the eyes, and smiled without trying too hard. Mark gave him a quick tour and explained how he wanted the hallway repainted in a soft gray, maybe something with a satin finish. I nodded along, but most of it was between the two of them. Mark trusted people too easily sometimes, but I had to admit, Travis seemed capable. I noticed small things that first morning. The way Travis moved with purpose, how cleanly he taped the borders before picking up a brush. I was just in the kitchen making coffee when I looked down the hallway and saw him kneeling, brushing careful strokes along the baseboard. He had his AirPods in, and he was humming along to something only he could hear. It felt peaceful. Mark had a work meeting around noon and left with a wave and a "be good." It was a running joke between us, lighthearted and harmless. I smiled and nodded, already wiping the counter. That's when the silence set in. Travis kept working, and I kept doing little things around the house, organizing mail, putting laundry in, pretending not to notice that every time I passed the hallway, he was still painting, slowly and steadily. He was so focused, and I respected that. But at one point, I stood at the doorway just watching him. He turned suddenly and caught me. "Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt," I said quickly. He pulled one earbud out. No. "You're not interrupting." He smiled again. That same calm one. "You're really good at this," I offered, stepping a little closer. "I like painting. I know it's just walls to most people, but I treat it like it's someone's canvas. Your home tells a story." His voice was low, careful. I hadn't expected someone like him to talk about painting like that. There was something thoughtful about it, something different. I stood there a second too long. "I'll get out of your way," I said, retreating. But I didn't stop thinking about what he'd said. Or the way he said it. Later that afternoon, he knocked gently on the kitchen doorway. "I ran into a snag," he said. He motioned to the far end of the hallway where there was an old mirror attached to the wall. Behind it, apparently, the paint was chipping badly. "I'll need to scrape this before I go any further," he explained. Didn't want to damage anything. I appreciated that. He didn't just do things without asking. "Want me to help you hold it?" I offered. "You sure?" he asked. "Yeah." So I followed him down the hall, and we both held the mirror as he slowly unscrewed the back. When it came loose, he stepped back slightly and I turned, our hands brushing briefly. He froze. I did too. It was just a moment, but it lingered. That half second of eye contact, of unspoken awareness. I stepped away first. "Let me know if you need anything else," I said, keeping my voice steady. He nodded, his jaw tight. That evening, Mark came home, admired the progress, and gave Travis a pat on the back. "You're making us look fancy," he joked. Travis smiled politely. Over the next few days, the hallway started to transform. The dull old walls were becoming something soft and elegant. Every morning, Travis would show up on time. Every evening, he'd clean up meticulously before leaving. But the air between us started to change. I caught myself wearing different things. Not obvious, just slightly nicer tops, a touch of gloss on my lips. I felt ridiculous, yet there was a flutter I hadn't felt in a long time. Mark was always either on calls or traveling. He didn't notice. One afternoon, rain poured outside. Travis was stuck inside, finishing the upper corners near the ceiling. I walked by with a mug of tea and offered him one. "Thanks," he said. He took it with both hands and looked at me longer than he should have. I'm not trying to be weird or anything, he added, but you seem like you don't get noticed as much as you should. That silenced me. Not because it was wrong, because it wasn't.
I didn't respond.
I just sipped my tea and walked back into the kitchen, heart pounding. The next morning, he came earlier than usual. I wanted to finish the trim before your husband gets back, he explained. You said he's coming home around noon today, right? I nodded. He started working while I busied myself with breakfast. And then something happened. I heard a loud thud and ran toward the hall. Travis had pushed too hard against the stepladder and bumped his shoulder into the wall, smearing a streak of fresh gray paint across the wood panel. Shoot, he muttered, grabbing a cloth. I crouched beside him. You okay?
Yeah.
Just clumsy today. We were close, too close. His shoulder brushed mine, and the smell of paint mixed with something warmer. Then, as he leaned over to wipe the paint deeper along the wood, his arm pressed against me, unintentionally, or maybe not. The hallway was narrow, but he didn't pull back. He just kept wiping slowly, methodically, his breath quiet and his movements slow. He pushed the cloth deep into the groove between the paneling and the wall, a motion that felt almost exaggerated.
I didn't say anything.
I didn't move. I stayed silent. That moment hung in the air like wet paint on a cold day. He finally pulled back and looked at me. I'm sorry, he said softly. For what? I whispered. He shook his head like he didn't want to say the wrong thing. Then Mark's car pulled into the driveway. Everything shifted. Travis stood, wiped his hands, and resumed painting like nothing had happened. I stood there, heart racing, trying to collect myself. Mark walked in seconds later, cheerful and clueless. Smells like progress, he laughed. I smiled too quickly. Travis finished the job that evening. He packed up his supplies, loaded them into his truck, and walked back to say goodbye. It looks great, Mark said, clapping him on the back again. Thanks. Glad you like it. He looked at me once before stepping outside. Just one long look that said more than either of us had words for. I walked back into the hallway later, fingers brushing along the freshly painted wall. Everything looked beautiful.
Clean.
Renewed. But every inch of it held a memory. I still hadn't said a word about what happened. Not to Mark. Not to anyone. Because sometimes silence doesn't mean nothing happened. Sometimes it's where everything lives. And that hallway? It still holds the quiet, the brush of skin, the soft press, the too deep moment that I never spoke of but never forgot. A true,